Rocky, I don't even know what you look like. Can I touch your face?
Of course, Diana.
Oh, God. Oh, God. What is this? What is all this? Am I touching the outside of a house? Oh, God. You're a monster.
I'm beautiful on the inside.
Yeah, but Rocky, there's a limit. Oh, what is this now? Does your face have a pelvis?
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, I am SocioPsycho, and this is Mob Reviews, and today we're going to dive into exactly how well Albino Lullaby, created by Ape Law, pulls off the attempt at horror. Now, it's very important to note that they proclaim that this game has no jump scares and no gore. How well is it able to actually pull this off? To have a scary, enthralling mistress game with no jumpies or gore? This surreal adventure is available on PC, and we will begin dissecting it by going into the options menu. Now, when we go into the options menu, for the graphic quality of the game is actually quite simplistic. It does have a wide berth of screen resolutions, which I do appreciate. It's always nice to see that. As well as they have a FOV slider, field of view slider, by a number digit, so you're able to get the exact number that you want. So that is always nice to see. For the gamma, there is a slight discrepancy for the gamma, as it doesn't have a example marker of match the image in the background to just barely being able to be seen, as you are aware of in other horror games or stealth games. That way, it coordinates the lighting effects in the game to your own visual capability, thus balancing it out. Not having that does fall into some more severe issues with the lighting of the game, but we'll talk more about that when we get into the stealth aspect of this horror game. When we back out, you do have quality. Now, the options you do have available for the quality settings are quite simplistic. Graphically, the game is very simplistic. It looks like a early 2000 game as it was done in Unity engine. It's not horrible, as I've experienced no clipping, tearing, crashing, or really any bad performance issues. It's been running at 60 frames per second. So while the graphical quality of the game is actually quite simplistic, it has not been to a detriment for the game. Again, when it comes to the sound options, the voice acting in this game is very well done, and we'll give you a taste of that when we go into the story. The effects and the music are so-so. The music doesn't really carry over in every aspect as it could have, but it's not horrible when it does pop up, and it does help cement when it's trying to be atmospherically heavy. The music does play a good role, but the majority of the times it doesn't really kick in and you don't really notice it, as I do appreciate they have them on multiple sliders. And lastly, the controller options of the game. While you do have options for your mouse speed, there's no changeability in the controllers of getting around the game. It's simply a walk, WASD, run, shift, and crouch, with your right mouse button activating a few items, as well as E picking up a few items. Not having these controller options being rebindable is a detriment to the game, as it would have been fairly simple to implement, and not everybody prefers that sort of layout. So let us begin by talking about the world and exactly how you come about into this world. As I stated, this game states that it is a horror genre with no gore or jump scares. So what is the story? Where is the enthrallment, and what or how do you arrive into this situation? So how do you end up in this place? And it begins with a very avoidable accidental car accident, and you wake up in this cage, and you're like, what's going on here? Why am I in this cage? Upon which you are then again met with a accidental breakage of your cage, allowing you to escape. So a very beginning aspect of a story, instead of implementing some sort of heavy emotional deterrent or motivation to get out of there or to avoid the enemies that are in the world, you end up with a, well, okay, here I am, I guess fate has smiled upon me, that I am now free. Where exactly am I? And it's a mixture in between a surreal experience in the story as you progress through these massive levels, but the story itself does not really unfold all that well to you. The majority of the plot details come from little notes, but these notes don't really tell you that much. They are little snippets, no more, of somebody who's either a madman or terrified, They really give no insight or motivational intrigue for your own survival in this world. And because of that, unless you really want to gather up all the achievements and go as a sort of hunter for all the notes in the game, upon how the fluidity of the game is created later on, the notes, the core aspect of the story to help fill out some questions but still leaves plenty more, you end up finding yourself not really interested in picking up these notes later on because they're not really worth it. This more so over is the case due to the distance in between checkpoints is fairly large, and having to redo it because you made one mistake gets pretty tedious, which means that picking up the notes repetitively becomes something that you're not really interested in. The other aspect of the story is done in a manner upon where a voice talks, or multiple voices, of these monsters. They have their own little community, and you're trying to figure out exactly how did you arrive, why are you there, and everything else, but the monsters don't engage in that conversation. At best, they describe you as a worm who has escaped your cage, not as an experiment, or as a initiate, or as someone who's going to join the hive, or some even food. They don't consider you. For some reason, they are scared of you, but there's no overhearing the conversations that would help insight who you are or what's happening and why you're there into this world. The way this game feels and looks in its surreal atmosphere is best described as a carnival haunted house that had sex with a Rocky Horror Picture Show, and this game would be that child. It doesn't really make all that much sense, and it has some spook here and there, and you're trying to figure out the oddity and weirdness of it while supposedly need to be afraid. Now, the story, as I said, is confusing, but the voice acting of some of the monsters at the different times is played rather well, and it does make it bearable. If it had bad voice acting, this game would be shot by all redeemability. But the voice acting it does have is pretty well, and I'll let you hear that for yourself now.
Understand? There is a worm among us, hiding in our hearth and home. Did you not hear Cornelius? No bathing till we find the worm and bring it back downstairs, where a worm blood rises downstairs with the other worm in the walkway. How disgusting! Disgusting! You toot on a horn and bang on a drum, and I'm disgusted with it. Such a worthless creature, and look at the trouble it's causing us. We are told to sit still, to wait for it. Keep eyes and ears open and hearts free of bad thoughts.
So with the story being confusing as it is, without much motivation or purpose, it falls down to the atmosphere to really pick up where the story has not motivated the player to survive. And the level design of the world is fairly large. A lot of effort has gone into it, a lot of creativity and love has gone into it, and this is obvious. There's no doubt in my mind that the intricacy of the levels, the largeness, the scale, the capability, were done in a conjunction to one part not confuse the player in a manner of where am I, but this is kind of maze-like, but not to the point of frustration, and a second part of wow, this is just really weird, which goes back to the house feel. The level design is uniquely done because even though you do backtrack in some areas and you see the same locations that you have previously earlier in the game gone through, it mixes it up radically with a sudden change in the danger level of how you interact with this environment. For now, maybe floors will try to crush you, or there'll be flaming pits. It fits in succinctly, and the level design of the game is actually done quite well. Which brings us to the horror aspect of the game. If a game is able to allow your exploration with ease and very limited confusion, how does it scare you? Where is the fear? And the fear that the game states does not have any jump scares, which it doesn't, and it doesn't have any gore, which it doesn't. But then how am I supposed to be afraid? And I've said repeatedly multiple times that gore does not equal fright. You don't need to see 10 bodies to be afraid. that doesn't instill fear, it may just instill empathy for those bodies. Seeing one streak of blood along a wall in a dark hallway is more fearful than seeing 10 dead bodies. But this game has neither of those. So it has to rely heavily on the player's own capability in exciting themselves in not being seen by an opponent who is dreadful. So it means it has to go a stealth aspect. And this is really where the game falls short. Because if you're going to run a horror game with less horror and more stealth, which is perfectly fine, you need to make sure your stealth elements in the game are equally matched with your monsters and appearance, and that your mechanics for stealth are actually well done. The game lacks severely in this capability so badly that it's not really representative as a horror game, as while the monsters at first may be a bit spooky, they may be, ooh wow that's creepy, or whoa that's really unnerving, depending on the person. But the large quantity by the end of the game that you run into do not hold any weight. They do not change anything, and the continuational, intense game of tag that you end up playing with these monsters, because one part checkpoints are so long in between, and the second part is when one monster notices you, the entire hive of monsters notice you. So even though one monster notices you, now every single monster on that level is going to come after you. This engorged with the fact that enemies respawn, so even if you are able to kill them in later progression of the game, or manipulate the environment to get rid of them, another one will take his place. So with an enemy who is abundant, who is numerous, who is perhaps not the most I'm going to tear you in two, but if I touch you you're going to die, you need a stealth mechanical system that allows the player the opportunity to sneak past them and allow for the own anxiety of that experience to frighten the player into not being seen. Such as, I wonder what's behind this door, I'm going to open this door, holy crap, the door opened up right as I was going towards it, but I was able to pinch myself against the wall and not be seen as the creature slithers by. There is none of that. The stealth aspects of the game are very confusing, which goes into the lighting. Because there is no light gem in the game, even though you think you are in shadows, and the screen can be a pitch dark area, you are by all means and capability, as far as you can tell the player, in a pitch dark corner which nobody could see, but the monster will still see you and they will attack you. This really confusing and continued questionability of is he going to see me or not makes it so that even if you progress in the most stealthiest of manners, you still end up getting seen, which makes all the monsters proc, which means that you have to run around the map. So if they do catch you, you're not going to stealth through again, you're just going to run. You're going to run around, try to find where you need to go, and do that continuously as many times that you can. It's less about a horror feeling of a stealth game, and more about, well, let me just have an intense game of tag, because I need to find out where I need to go by running and avoiding these creatures, because stealth will not work. And the stealth aspect or lack of really does come down to the movement. While running versus crouching and walking will alert people to you faster, the floors that you move upon do not signify sound and discrepancy in that manner to the enemies. It's purely a visual identifier. The game at best could be described as spooky because the monsters in the beginning are unknown, but as soon as you do get to know them, they're not all that impressive. And it quickly becomes obvious less about how do I survive through this dark, creepy area, and more about just run this time and see if I get it, or if that doesn't work, then I'll just run again and see if I get it. As you progress through the level design, there are lanterns, which once you find blue matches, you can light these lanterns. And the lanterns don't stay lit indefinitely, they will eventually run out for whatever reason. But if you have one of these blue lanterns lit, the monsters will not go into that light. Which begs the question on a story, level design, and stealth aspect of why are these lanterns here? Who would create blue lanterns in a society of creatures that apparently hate blue lanterns? Because you can't put a blue match into an orange lantern and turn it blue, so it's the matches and the lanterns that you have to combine. So why are they all around the map? Why are these creatures afraid of this blue light? And from a stealth aspect, the only usage that this has to me, because they don't last indefinitely, meaning I can't change the route, the patrolling route that the enemy takes by lighting one of these lanterns strategically placed in between the patrol route of a monster to then allow access to a location that I previously couldn't because of his patrol route. Less about that and more about, well, I'm being chased, I better throw one of these lanterns on, allowing me more time and distance in between them and me. Unfortunately, the stealth aspect in the game is not about the fear of being caught, because once you're caught, you just get infected, the screen goes black, and you restart at a checkpoint. There's really no emotional or visual reason to do everything you possibly can to avoid these, as even the system itself is not really geared for a more stealth-based atmosphere. So at the end of the day, when we look at Albino Lullaby and its idea that this surreal, episodic experience, which will last you about 2 to 3 hours, which also, take a note, does feel a bit longer than 2 to 3 hours, and not in a good way because of the repetitive nature of, well, let me try again. It dulls you out. It doesn't intentionally draw the levels or your tasks out. It doesn't disrespect your time. And that's important to note, because if you do enjoy the game, it's not going to disrespect your time, but it definitely draws it out in the manner that you feel you played longer than you really have, due to the fact that you have to restart at a checkpoint and the checkpoints are so far back. It doesn't have a fluidity in how the motion you arrive through the gameplay, through the different levels, how the story connects to the character, how your stealth aspects versus the monsters versus the environment all tie into each other, because they don't. There's no correlation upon how the world or the emotional capabilities that you should feel for your character, or the threat of death or the fear. There is none of that for the character. With a ending which is quite frankly very predictable. As you get 40 to 50% through the game, it becomes quite obvious what the ending is going to arrive at, and you end up being right. There's no emotional tie-in or sentiment. A slight change in the story dialogue, as when you were driving, is if you looked over to the passenger seat and you saw your daughter or your wife or, a loved one, whatever, and that was your goal. To find that loved one, to try to really escape, not for the base instinct of surviving for yourself, but to find and save the one you loved. That would have at least some purpose. A tiny, tiny little plot twist like that would make an incentivized purpose, but it doesn't have any purpose other than just get out of here. But it doesn't motivate you, and the level design doesn't enthrall you either to get out. It enthralls you to go deeper in, with questioning as to why do I have to find the grandmother, which is the ruler of these creatures. Why can't I just leave and try to escape, try to claw my way out of this bizarre world that I'm in? Why must I fight these creatures and try to take down their society? It doesn't make sense. Maybe these are things and questions that will be answered in later episodes, but as it stands now, with really the first episode being the catalyst to how you will enjoy the entire game, and it leaving so many questions unfilled through the entire gameplay, and the gameplay itself being rather lacking, it begs the question of why would I want to dive into the next chapters if it doesn't even present itself in a manner of intrigue to begin with. As I stated earlier, the level design does make a very beautiful and elegant, and can tell that they did put a lot of effort into it. But the amount of effort you put into a level with completely relaxing on how you interact with the monsters, and how the monsters are so easily manipulated due to their bizarre fear of blue lights, makes the game not scary. You don't need jump scares, you don't need gore, but if you're not going to have those things, then you do need stealth in order to compensate for such. And unfortunately, the stealth elements of this game, which would drive a horror sense or an auxiliary sense to the player, are lackluster so much to a point where the game just feels like a giant experience of tag. Don't let them touch you. If they touch you, you're out. Then you get to play again in round 2. In all honesty, the game is a stone throw away from being a walking simulator. It has minor things such as running around and pushing buttons here and there that will open a door, or grab a key, which is a room next to the room that you need the key in, or connect occasionally a plug into an outlet. Minor things which would be considered as gameplay with a horror hopeful zest painted over, in order for it not to be considered a walking simulator, but by all honesty, it really is one. It's a surreal experience of a bizarre world, interesting linear pathways, which could be a nice experience of visualization for somebody with Oculus Rift. But as a gameplay and the survivability upon the mechanics working in tandem with the game, it really is lackluster. And so it's very important to note that if you are picking up this game, hoping to be scared, hoping that you will have a sense of dread or fear or wonder, you will be disappointed. Perhaps, as this video is an opinion, as reviews are opinion, and everybody is different, if you do scare easy, of course, just about any horror game will scare you. But if you are experienced, if you are capable, if you do not jump at the sound of a breeze at nighttime through the hallowing trees, then this will be nothing more than a waste of your time or a disappointment, not because the game is being disrespectful to you, but because the content within it is not worth it for an experienced gamer. You can't even lean left or right to peek around the corners or anything else. As I said multiple times, the game is lackluster in what sort of capabilities it even has available in your progression through the world in managing these different tasks. And the only way you can really manage is just to run around till you find the correct button to push. So ladies and gentlemen, as far as a horror game goes, which it proclaims itself to be, absolutely not. I will not recommend this game as a horror game. I will not recommend this as a game of story-enthralled, fear-induced anxiety. But the voice acting, which is done very well, and the surreal element of it can make it an enjoyable experience for somebody who enjoys a very specific kind of walking simulator and doesn't mind reloading multiple times in order to run past a monster. As I said, 3 hours of gameplay felt like 6 because of the checkpoint reloads. So it's really up to you as the individual to base your decision on that. I've been SocioPsycho, this is my Mob Reviews. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.